Now that we've looked at the stories, let's go ahead and take a look at assignment 1. So I'm going to go to the core shell and I'm going to go to module 1. And at the bottom of module 1, you'll see the assignment document. And we're going to do some preliminary design this week. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to formulate clarifying questions on the user stories. So when we looked at the user stories, there are some acceptance requirements and a brief description, but there's not nearly enough detail to actually go and implement a system. Some of this you'll be able to fill in yourself fairly straightforwardly, but other parts of the story may not be clear to you. And you may have some questions about how to actually implement those things. So what we'd like you to do is read all the project stories. The epic story contains the idea behind the project and is included as an overview. There are 4 stories that should be tackled first in Sprint 1. So we're going to form you up into teams next week, and each person in a team of 4 is going to take on one application that addresses one story. But for this week, before we formed you into teams, we want you to understand how the whole system fits together. So we'd like you to read all 4 of the Sprint 1 stories. And after you've read them, for each story, formulate questions that you'll need answered in order to proceed with your implementation. So we want at least 2 questions for each story, but feel free to ask more than that, and you'll probably need to do that. What we're going to do is gather up all of your questions, and we're going to create discussion threads, and we're going to post your questions along with the answers to those discussion threads so that everybody in the class can benefit from all of the answers to all of the questions. So that's worth 30%. And then we'd like you to mock up some user interface designs. So this should be your conception of what the application should look like from the user's perspective. So what does the interface look like? What are the buttons on the screen? What text is on the screen? What other user interface widgets are on the screen? And also include multiple screens if you have different pictures for what happens when you click on buttons or interact with the user interface in some way. Now, once again, you're going to go ahead and mock up user interfaces for all 4 of the user stories this week. You don't have to actually make your code work. It doesn't have to run. It doesn't have to interact with the user. It just has to look the way that you think it should look. So go ahead and build the user interface in whichever GUI builder you're going to be working with. Visual Studio or IntelliJ if you're working in C# or Java, PHP Storm if you want to do web stuff. Get the interface right in the GUI builder, and don't worry about making it interactive. And there's a bonus if you implement at least one of your GUIs in the other tool, one of the other tools. So for example, let's say you're a C# person and you want to work in Visual Studio. If you do 3 of your user interfaces in Visual Studio and do the last one in either IntelliJ or PHP Storm, you get a bonus. And that's worth 10% bonus on top of 40% for the user interface designs. And then part 3 of assignment 1, which is worth 30 points, is to come up with some implementation notes. So this is basically an overall system architecture, how you plan to break the system down into parts, and then also the main classes that will likely make up your design. So it doesn't have to include all of the properties and methods that you're going to have on your classes. Feel free to include that information if you have a good feeling for what you want to put in there. But at least on a high level, we want to know how you want to split the problem up. Relationships between the classes, any libraries that you think you might need to implement your solution. You'll probably need a library in order to send email. You'll probably need a library to talk to the database. If you think there are any complex algorithms that need to be developed for your stories, then sketch out how you intend to approach those algorithms. and any other outside components that you need. And if there are parts of the problem that you don't really understand how to do just yet, it's a good idea to make note of those things as well. So anything else that might be relevant to your implementation that you want to keep track of for when you start. So that's everything for assignment 1. You'll be putting all this information into a Word document. Feel free to take screen captures of your UI mockups. You don't have to actually submit the code, and upload that to the assignment folder when you're done.